The year is 1221. Central Asia. Imagine standing on the high walls of a city that has stood for centuries. The air is cold. The sun is setting, casting long, jagged shadows over the Silk Road. You are a guard. You've heard the rumors. You've heard of the scourge from the east. But as you look at the horizon, waiting for the thunder of thousands of hooves, you hear nothing. Only the sound of your own heart, beating against your chest. This was the first weapon of Genghis Khan. Not the blade, but the silence. Most armies of the time wanted you to hear them. They wanted to intimidate you with drums, horns, and war cries. But the Mongols? They approached like ghosts. They moved in perfect, eerie synchronization. Thousands of men, thousands of horses, moving across the plains without a single shout. The psychological weight of that silence was heavier than any catapult stone. It made the defenders wonder, are they even human? Or are they demons sent to collect our debts? Then, just as the sun disappears, you hear it. A faint, haunting whistle in the wind. High-pitched. Constant. It's the whistling arrows. Mongol scouts firing hollow-tipped shafts into the air. They weren't meant to kill you, yet. They were meant to scream in your ears that death has arrived. Genghis Khan knew a fundamental truth of human nature. Imagined pain is always greater than the pain itself. Before a single drop of blood was shed, the city was already falling. Because the Mongols didn't just conquer lands. They conquered the very soul of their enemies. They were the masters of psychological shadows. And this was only the beginning. This is the story of the greatest empire in history, built on the art of psychological terror. Genghis Khan knew that the battle is won long before the first arrow is fired. Months before the Mongol horde arrived, a different kind of invader entered the cities. Merchants, travelers, and monks, or so they seemed. They were the Khan's eyes and ears. They mapped every street, counted every granary, and identified every weakness in the city's walls. But their most important mission was not to gather information. It was to plant the seeds of madness. In the crowded markets and dark taverns, these spies whispered stories. They spoke of an army that drank the blood of their enemies. An army that couldn't be killed by iron or fire. They told tales of how entire empires were erased from the map in a single night. These weren't just rumors, it was a calculated psychological virus. By the time the city's leaders heard of the Mongols, the people were already paralyzed by terror. They weren't just facing soldiers anymore, they were facing a legend of inevitable destruction. Why did Genghis Khan cultivate such a brutal reputation? Because he understood that mercy is expensive, but fear is free. If a city resisted, he made sure the world knew exactly what happened to it. Total annihilation. He used those who escaped to tell the story, turning survivors into his most effective messengers. The Mongols turned reputation into a siege weapon. A city that is already convinced it will lose, has already lost. The mind collapses, then the walls follow. This was the architect of fear at work. Every move, every rumor, and every shadow was a brick in a wall of psychological imprisonment. While the kings prepared their swords, the Khan was already sharpening his words. The Mongols were the first to prove that information is more powerful than steel. But as the tension reaches its peak, the ultimate choice remains. Surrender, or vanish into history. When the Mongol army finally surrounded a city, they didn't attack immediately. They gave the defenders a choice. But it wasn't a choice between life and death. It was a choice between becoming a part of the empire, or being erased from history. According to the Great Yasa, the Mongol code of laws, the terms were clear. If you opened your gates without a fight, your people were spared. You paid a tribute, and you survived. But if you resisted, even for a single day, there would be no mercy. The Khan's word was absolute. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a force of nature. Imagine the king standing on his walls, looking down at the endless sea of felt tents. He sees the white tent of the Khan. In Mongol tradition, a white tent meant mercy was still an option. But as the days passed and the city remained defiant, the white tent was replaced by a red one. Red meant blood. Red meant the siege had begun. And if that turned into a black tent, it meant everyone inside the walls was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. This was the ultimate psychological clock. A ticking bomb that forced the leaders to betray their own pride to save their people. To make sure every city understood the stakes, the Mongols used example cities. Take Nishapur. When they killed a Mongol prince, the retaliation was beyond human comprehension. The Mongols didn't just kill the soldiers. They killed the civilians. They killed the animals. They even beheaded the cats and dogs. They built massive pyramids out of human skulls to serve as a warning to the next city on their path. A warning that said, do not choose pride over survival. This wasn't just cruelty, it was strategic terror designed to win 100 battles without firing another arrow. One by one, the great Silk Road cities fell. Not always to the sword, but to the weight of their own fear. Kings who thought they were invincible found themselves kneeling in the dust before the Khan's feet. The Mongols had mastered the most difficult art of war. Turning an enemy's own hope into their greatest weakness. Now, as the world burned, only one question remained. What happens when there is no one left to surrender? The Mongols didn't just build an empire of land, they built an empire of influence. From the shores of the Pacific to the gates of Europe, the map of the world was redrawn. But how did so few manage to control so many? The answer lies in the ghost army effect. Even when the Mongol soldiers were hundreds of miles away, their shadow remained over every city. A governor wouldn't dare to rebel, not because of the guards at his door, but because of the nightmare in his mind. They had institutionalized fear. They made surrender feel like the only rational choice for humanity. But history is never black and white. Out of this darkness came a strange, brutal peace, the Pax Mongolica. Because the Mongols had crushed every opposing will, the Silk Road became safer than ever before. A maiden with a golden plate could travel from one end of the empire to the other without being harmed. Ideas, inventions, and cultures flowed across continents. Gunpowder, the compass, and printing technology began their journey to the west. The very foundation of our modern world was laid upon the ashes of the cities they burned. This is the ultimate irony of the Mongol siege. The world's most terrifying warriors became the architects of global connection. Today, the Mongol Empire is gone, buried under the dust of time. But their Zayan Sanati, the art of the mind, still lives on. Modern propaganda, psychological operations, and even corporate branding use the same principles Genghis Khan mastered 8 centuries ago. Create a reputation that precedes you. Make your victory seem inevitable. Destroy the enemy's will to fight before the first word is spoken. We think we are different from the people who stood on those ancient walls, trembling at the sound of a whistling arrow. But are we? Or are we still governed by the same shadows and whispers? 3:30 to 4:30, final, Terahin Sesai's Tanaklari. As you look at the horizon today, the silence is different. The whistling arrows are gone, replaced by the digital hum of a connected world. But the lesson of the Mongols remains etched in the soul of history. The greatest walls are not built of stone and mortar. They are built in the mind. And the greatest conqueror is not the one who holds the sharpest sword, but the one who masters the silence. This was the Mongol silence. And perhaps, if you listen closely to the wind, you can still hear it.